Hello, and welcome to Housing 101, the beginner's guide to the different types of housing assistant programs. My name is Lynette Pearl, and I am the Senior Associate of Housing with Refugee Housing Solutions, which is a project of Church World Service, a faith-based organization working to help communities around the globe with sustainable responses to hunger, poverty, displacement, and disaster. In this quick Beginner 101 webinar, I will go over the different types of housing assistant programs. Before we can talk about the different types of housing assistance programs that are available, we need to understand what affordability is and how subsidies make housing affordable for low-income families. Affordable housing, defined by Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is known as HUD, is a dwelling where a family or a household can obtain housing, whether through renting or purchasing, and will not spend more than 30% of their gross household income. FYI, gross income is income before taxes and deductions. So housing is considered affordable if an individual or family is not spending more than 30% of their gross income on rental or mortgage payments. I'm an example type of person, so we're going to use an example to understand what affordability is. So let's look at Miss I Need a Home. Miss I Need a Home, monthly income is $100, and she is seeking an affordable unit. For Miss I Need a Home to meet the affordability criteria based on HUD, her rent must be no more than $30 per month. I know 30 is cheap, but for this particular training, we're going to use simple calculations and simple numbers so we can understand these scenarios. So, but I wish we could have $30 rent at this day and age in this housing crisis. So in order for her rent to be affordable, she could not pay more than $30 per month. So that's affordability for Miss I Need a Home. So now we're going to see how subsidized and subsidies work. If an individual or family is receiving a subsidy, they will not pay more than 30% of their income towards the rent, and the remaining balance will be paid by HUD. So let's pick on Miss I Need a Home again. So Miss I Need a Home, her monthly income is $100 per month. She currently lives in a Section 8 project-based unit with her rent being $200. Now, with this particular scenario, you're stating, well, how can she afford $200 when in the last scenario, in order for it to be affordable based on her income, she cannot pay more than 30s. Well, with the subsidy, her portion of the rent will still be 30, and with HUD picking up the remaining balance of 170. So hopefully you can see in these two scenarios how and why low-income families will need subsidies in order to make their rent affordable. We are now going to go over the common housing subsidies, which are public housing, the Housing Choice Voucher Program, subsidized project-based Section 8, Section 8, moderate rehabilitation, single room occupancies, which is known as SROs, and low-income housing tax credit. Public housing programs are properties owned by government and funded through HUD, but administered by a local public housing authority and available for low-income families and individuals whose household income is less than 80% of the area's median income, which stands for AMI. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is like public housing. It is too funded through HUD, administered by a local housing authority, and available for low-income families and individuals whose household income is less than 80% AMI. The Housing Choice Voucher is the federal government's largest program that assists the elderly, disabled, and low-income families in securing housing in the private market. Since housing assistance is provided on behalf of the family or individual, participants can find their own housing, including single-family homes, townhouses, and apartments. With the Housing Choice Program, the subsidy is paid directly to the landlord or property manager by the housing authority on behalf of the participating family. The family is still responsible for paying the difference between the actual rent charged by the landlord. Under certain circumstances, if authorized by the housing authority, a family may use its voucher to purchase a modest home, which is the HCV home ownership voucher. So we'll talk about that a little later when we talk about the different type of vouchers that are available. Project-based Section 8 housing is a government-funded program that provides rental housing to low-income households in privately owned and managed rental units. Now, with this program, the subsidy stays with the unit, unlike the Housing Choice Voucher. So we're going to use that earlier scenario, but I Miss Need a Home. She currently lived in a project-based Section 8 housing unit. That's why she could afford it, with the rent being $200 with the subsidy. However, Miss I Need a Home wants to move. She wants to move to Texas. And unfortunately, when she moves, she will no longer have that subsidy because the subsidy is tied to the unit and not to her. Low-income housing tax credit property is an apartment complex or housing project owned by a developer or landlord who is participating in the federal low-income housing tax credit program. With this particular program, developers and landlords receive tax credits by providing affordable housing to low-income tenants at a restricted rent amount. To qualify for a unit, one must earn less than 60% AMI. So we're going to talk about the different types of vouchers. Housing vouchers, they are highly effective of reducing homelessness. They create a housing stability and contribute to lifting people out of poverty. Besides the Housing Choice Voucher, there are other vouchers available to low-income individuals, such as the Emergency Voucher, the Project-Based Voucher, NED Voucher, VASH, and Housing Choice Home Ownership. The Emergency Housing Voucher Program, it is available through the American Rescue Plan Act. HUD is providing over 70,000 housing choice vouchers to local housing authorities to administrate in order to assist individuals and families who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, human trafficking, recently homeless, or have a high risk of housing instability. The good thing about this, HUD does have a live data dashboard that provides daily updates of what vouchers, voucher availability, as you can see in the slide. This is a screenshot of what that data, that live dashboard looks like. If you're unable to get on HUD's website and you're interested for a client for emergency housing voucher, simply just call your local housing authority to see if they have any availability of housing vouchers and how to apply. Project-based vouchers, they are a component of the housing authorities as well, and they're extension of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Housing authorities use this tenant-based voucher funding to allocate vouchers to project-based units within a project. So rental vouchers are tied to a specific number of units in a building. The assistance, again, with this particular voucher, it stays with the unit after a tenant moves out. NED is is also part of the Housing Choice Voucher that enables non-elderly disabled families to lease affordable private housing of their choice. To qualify for this voucher, the head of the household or spouse or co-head has to be under the age of 62 with a disability. The HUD Veterans Affairs Support Housing Voucher, commonly known as VASH, is a housing choice voucher for homeless veterans. This program combines rental assistance with case management and clinical services. With this particular voucher, the case management and the clinical services is provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is known as the VA. As I stated earlier, the homeownership program, the Housing Choice Voucher homeownership program does provide vouchers to family admitted to the HCV program to purchase a home and receive monthly assistance in meeting their home ownership expenses. With this particular program, the family has to currently be in the HCV program, and that housing authority has to offer that particular voucher. So if you have a client that's interested in home ownership, they would need to contact their housing authority, which they have their voucher with, to see if they do offer that home ownership voucher where they can transfer into that program. So there are systems in place to address the needs of individuals experiencing homelessness. And one of the largest systems is the continuum of care, which works hand in hand with coordinated entry. So we're going to talk about this, known as the COC, and the COC programs that they fund. So the continuum of care, known as the COC, is a program designed by HUD to coordinate local homeless services. It is designed to assist and provide services to individuals, including unoccupied youth and families experiencing homelessness, with the combination of wraparound services in order for them to secure housing as soon as possible. More broadly, the COC program is designed to promote community-wide planning and strategic use of resources to address homelessness and improve coordination. Also, COCs are required to establish a coordinated entry system as part of their community-wide planning mandate. The coordinated entry system is a centralized or coordinated process designed to coordinate program, participant, intake, assessment, and provision of referrals. The system covers the geographic area, is easy accessible, and should ensure that all people experience a housing crisis have fair and equal access and are quickly identified and assessed for referrals and connected to housing and assistance based on their strengths and their needs. Coordinated entry, the coordinated entry process, it does differ significantly from community to community. Remember, it is created and crafted to that community's needs. So you would probably need to contact your local COC to understand how they implement the 4 core elements we're about to talk about within your community. You can go to HUD's website, and they do have a list of all the COCs. This chart shows the 4 core elements of the coordinated entry, which is access, assessment, prioritization, and referral, and how they relate to one. We're going to talk about how they relate to one another. Access is the first point of engagement for individuals and families that are experiencing a housing crisis. But again, this looks and functions differently in each community. For example, some communities might require you to call United Way for the access point, and others might require you to go to a designated assigned nonprofit. So after the access point, assessing the person needs and vulnerability will begin, which is the assessment point. And during the assessment, the person needs and level of vulnerability are documented and screened through tools and interviews. The most common tools I've seen used, but again, each community is slightly different, is the screening tool called the VI-SPDAT and the VAT. Also during the assessment, intervention case management is provided, a triage effect. After the assessment, the person needs and level of vulnerability are documented for the purpose of determining where they will go on the prioritization list. So the next step is the prioritization list. This helps the COC manage its inventory of community housing resources and services, ensuring that those persons with the greatest need and vulnerability receive the support they need to resolve their housing crisis. The final element in the coordinated entry process is the referral. And during that referral process, individuals and or families are referred to the appropriate services in accordance to what the COC's prioritization requirements are. So now we're going to transition into the programs that are funded through the COC program. There are several programs they fund, but for this webinar, we're going to focus on rapid rehousing, permanent housing, transitional housing, Section 8 moderate rehabilitation. So let's talk about rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing does provide short-term rental assistance and services. The goal is to help people obtain housing as quickly to increase self-sufficiency. With rapid rehousing, there are no preconditions such as employment. You don't have to be employed. You don't have to have an income at that time. Absence of a criminal record or sobriety. And also, you do not have to have a disability with this particular program. So the rapid rehousing, it typically lasts for 24 months. And after several months of being in this program, an individual solely subsidy is reduced. So if you start out unemployed in this program, receive a job and start making money, your amount towards the rent will increase and the subsidy will decrease. So the goal of this program is for you to get back on your feet as soon as possible. Like it says, rapid rehousing. Permanent supportive housing provides infinite leasing or rental assistance combined with supportive service for disabled persons experiencing homelessness so that they may live independently. With permanent supportive housing, at least one member of the household must have a disability. It could be an adult or child. So that's the requirement for this particular program. Transitional housing is designed to provide homeless individuals and families with interim stability and support to move to and maintain permanent housing successfully. Transitional housing may cover the cost up to 24 months of housing with supportive services. With this particular program participants, they must have a lease or a sublease or occupancy agreement when residing in transitional housing. Section 8, moderate rehabilitation, which we call SRO. This program provides rental assistance for very low income, single homeless individuals in obtaining decent, safe, and sanitary housing in privately owned rehabilitated buildings. So these programs I talked about, they are funded through the COC. So in order for a client to receive these type of services, they would need to go through the coordinate entry system, as we spoke about earlier, and get referred to make sure they're a proper fit for these particular programs. So we're going to talk about Housing First. What is Housing First, you might ask? Housing First, it is not an assistance program, but it is a homeless assistance approach. I'm going to repeat that. Housing First is not an assistance program, but a homeless assistance approach. And a lot of people use the Housing First model, especially in nonprofit and for subsidies. And this approach is to quickly and successfully connect individuals and families experiencing homelessness to permanent housing without preconditions and barriers to entry, such as sobriety, treatment, or service participation requirements. Support services are offered to maximize housing stability and prevent returns to homelessness as opposed to addressing predetermined treatment goals prior to permanent housing entry. For example, I was an old school case manager before the Housing First model rolled out. We were required to set goals and benchmarks for clients, and clients did not meet those goals or benchmarks, then we did not pursue the housing until those benchmarks were met. With the Housing First model stating that the old school way did not work. In order for a person to be successful, you need to house them first and work with them on their goals and their benchmarks while they're housed. So this is different than what we did back almost, I hate to tell my age, 20 years ago, because Housing First was not considered, we didn't have that model. And now this is the model that has been proven to be successful. It's kind of like the hierarchy of needs. You can't ask a person to work on their issues unless you give them the basics. And one of the basics is housing. So below, we're going to talk about the 5 principles of this model. And of course, immediate access to permanent housing with no housing readiness requirements. Like I stated back in the day, clients had to meet benchmarks before we pursued housing. But with this, it says no, immediate access to permanent housing with no housing readiness requirements, consumer choice and self-determination. That is another thing that the Housing First model promotes. Again, back in the day, we did cookie cutter case management. With the Housing First model, clients have a say in their case management and their goals. Recovery orientation, that's another key principle with this model. Individualized and client-driven support and social and community integration. Clients should have a voice in their case management and how they manage getting back on their feet. The Housing First philosophy, it values flexibility, individualized support, and client choice, again, their voice and autonomy. It never has been housing only, and it never should be. Support services are a big part of the Housing First model. And here is some references that I referred to in the webinar. So this concludes this webinar. If you need additional support, please go to our website at www.refugiehousing.org and check out our resources and upcoming trainings. And if you have a question about this webinar, feel free to email me and reach out to me at lpearl@cwsglobal.org. I hope you have a blessed day. Thank you.